Exam technique. This presentation is going to look at the exam technique you could use for your BTEC First Award Unit 2 Finance exam. Some of the strategies when answering the questions. Let's start with some key information. Firstly, your exam will be 1 hour long. It's what's called an on-screen test, so it will be completed on a computer using the Pearson specially designed exam software, which will lock the screen so you're not able to do anything else. It's out of 50 marks, and you should expect between about 18 and 24 questions. The software contains an online calculator and notepad, so you can press the button and it'll bring up the calculator, and you can do the same with the notepad and make any notes on there. You're also able to take in your own calculator if you want, and you can take in a pen, and you'll be given some paper which will have to be handed in the end, but you can take some notes on that. What's advisable is that you do all the working on the calculator on the screen, and then you copy your working over for each question, so your working is there showing how you've calculated a question. You can also use some accessibility options, so you can change the colour of the screen in the different settings with a button in the bottom left hand corner. Remember, the exam is positively marked. This means that they're not going to take marks away for the wrong answer. They're looking for where it's correct. So what I'd advise you start thinking about doing in the exam is, rather than finishing as quick as you can, take your time, and if you've got more time, add more detail to your answers, because you can only gain more marks and not actually lose marks. And of course, the results will be available around 50 days after taking the exam, and it is marked by a human, not a computer, so it's not too case sensitive like some of my exams that I may have shown you on my system. Right, really important here, don't finish early. You have 1 hour to take the test. There's no point finishing the test early because you're not going to go anywhere. You're going to be stuck in the exam room anyway. So don't click finish in the test to finish it early. Go back, check all your answers. Read every single question carefully. Don't leave any questions blank. You get no marks leaving it blank, but you may get a mark for getting it right. For the longer answer questions, go back through them and add more points and more detail. Again, like I said before, with it being positively marked, you're not going to lose any marks for adding more detail, adding more depth to your answers. Just make sure you don't waste that time. Use that hour to its maximum. You want to be told at the end, that's it, time's up, and the test actually is locking itself out for you. That's what you want to be up to. Let's start by looking at some of the more simple questions you may get, the outline questions. These questions typically require you just to show your knowledge. However, looking at the mark scheme, a good technique is to try and give an example alongside any definition. If it's possible, try and use an example from the business that may be using the question, if they're giving you one. So let's look at an example question, which is a range of direct and indirect costs. And the question, of course, says, outline what is meant by the term direct costs. What I suggest you do is, rather than just sit there watching this video, pause it now, actually have a go at answering that question. So try and give me a definition of the term direct cost, and then follow it on with an example, and link it to B and the honey making factory. Pause the video now, and then unpause it because we're going to look at the answer now. Okay, a possible answer could have been, direct costs are the costs that are directly linked to the production of the product or service. There's my knowledge, there's my 1 mark. In this case, it could be that the cost of the jars that are used to put the honey in that are being produced. There's an example of a cost which is directly linked to production. I need more jars if I'm going to sell more jars of honey. That's as simple as that. If you've got something along those lines where you've got your knowledge and then you've got a direct cost, something directly linked to production, you'll get yourself 2 marks. Nothing too complex there. You're probably thinking that's really simple. That's great. Let's move on. Calculate questions. By the very nature of the word calculate, these questions just require you to perform a calculation. Now, what I will say here is, a good technique is to write out the formula, if you're going to use it, and make sure you show your working. You do actually get marks for what they call follow through. So even if you get a question wrong with the answer, if your working was partly right, or shows how you've tried to calculate something, you may get a mark for that. Let's have a look at the question. B has sales of £70,000. However, it costs £30,000 to produce these jars of honey. Calculate the gross profit. So, think about this. You may want to pause the video and actually have a go at doing this, but I think the first thing you should do is say, what is gross profit? Write out the formula. Then, show your working, and then produce the answer. I want to pause the video now, because we're going to look at the answer. Okay, what you should have got was, gross profit equals revenue minus cost of sales. There is your knowledge shown. That's 1 mark, even if you get the answer wrong, because you've shown your working. Notice underneath you've got 70,000 minus 30,000. So you backed it up by reaffirming how you calculated that. And of course then you've got the answer, £40,000 gross profit, which is a correct answer. What I would advise you do now in the exam is, because if you do that on the calculator, you'll notice a button that says copy working to box. Press that button. It will copy all the working you've done straight into the box, so the examiner can see how you calculated it. And they're more likely to give you the marks, or at least pick up some of the follow-through marks. Take your time with these questions, don't panic. If you want to write them on your paper, write them on your paper. Break everything down, think logically about it. Remember, if you see the word net, net is a fancy word for total. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm panicking, I can't think about what's meant by that term net profit. Well, that's a total profit you get at the end, isn't it? That's the one, the smallest profit you get, because you've got to take away all your expenditure. Or if it's just about net assets, think about what you've got to take away to get net, total. You've got to take all your liabilities from all your assets, you know, so that's what it's trying to work out, net. So just put these little words in your head, don't panic too much about it all. And like, remember, like when we talk about working capital, another common mistake that people make. Think if it says how do you calculate working capital? Well, remember, it's the money in the business at any one time, what it's valued at today. So that's got to be your current assets minus your current liabilities. Don't leave anything blank. Just take your time and work through it. Let's look at a bit more complex style question, the explain question. These questions are basically asking you to tell me why your answer is valid. Now, what I will say is a good technique is to write out a definition of the key term, if you can spot it in the question, right at the start, because you're showing knowledge, you're picking up some knowledge marks. And give an example again, if possible, to back up your points. And if you can, try again to link it to the business in the question they're giving you. It just shows that you're applying your answer, showing a better level of knowledge. Let's look at this example. B is facing increased competition for honey. As a result, is considering reducing the selling price of each jar of honey. The question is, explain the impact that this will have on the break-even figure. So, you need to think about first, look at that question, what is the key term that we could define? Hopefully you spotted it, it'd be break-even. So you want to have your introduction line saying, break-even is. Now you need to explain your answer now. What will the impact be of reducing the selling price? So you need to tell me what it's going to be. So what will happen to break even if the selling price goes down? And then tell me why. Why is that answer valid? Pause the video now, and then we'll have a look at the answer next. Let's have a look at the answer we've got for this question. So the question was, explain the impact that this will have on the break-even figure. So the first thing I've done is got my knowledge mark in. Notice I've said break-even is the point where revenue and costs are equal and the business makes no profit or loss. There's my knowledge. Now I'm going to try and explain my point. So I'm going to say that if B reduces the selling price, and this will increase the break-even point. So there is the knowledge shown linked to the question. I said that if she sells the items for less, she needs to sell more to break even. Now I'm going to tell you why. So notice what I've gone and said now. I've made this a high level answer because I've explained using technical terms. This is because B will need to sell more jars as she'll make less gross profit on each jar sold. Now, I've used the term gross profit to show it's a technical answer. You'd probably get away with saying something like because she makes less on each item she sells. Or she doesn't make as much profit on each item she sells. But I'm just trying to show you how you can make it a technical answer. Notice that there's nothing advanced about that. I'm answering the question by showing knowledge and explaining. Telling me why. Lastly, these are the most difficult questions. These are the discuss questions. These are the ones where she may be worth 8 marks in the exam. Now, questions where they say the word discuss typically require you to describe and explain your answers in depth. Typically, you may want to show both sides of an argument, or you at least want to make 2 or 3 points. And personally, I like it when people form a conclusion at the end. So if you've got time, you can sum it all up and form a conclusion. Make sure you're answering the question that's set. That's the real important thing. So if it's asking you to discuss and it's leaving it open like that, well, that's both sides of the question. If it says, I don't know, discuss the advantages, you've got to make sure you discuss the advantages, or discuss the drawbacks, or discuss the potential issues. Make sure you actually answer the question that's set. But remember, because it's positively marked, if you've got the time, there's no harm in showing a decent level of knowledge to be able to tick those boxes and that criteria. Now, a good technique is to write out a definition of the key term in the question, if you can spot it. Again, so getting that key term at the start shows knowledge. Try and provide an example for each point you're making. And then try and develop this to put it into some depth about why. Why does that answer the question you're being asked? You want to make a second and a third point about the same level of detail. This sort of answer should have 2 or 3 well-explained points and examples. In an ideal world, we want a conclusion. We want to tie it all together at the end. The conclusion should not present new knowledge. Nothing new here. This is just the same techniques you'll see across the board. So let's take a look at this example here. B has got the following information about the products that she sells. So you've got the value honey, the finest honey, and the organic honey. You've got the output level, so the number of units she sells. You've got the break-even quantity for each item. You've got the variable cost for each item. And you've got the selling price for each item. And the question is quite simple. Discuss the impact that cutting the product range would have on B's business. So discuss the impact that cutting the product range would have on B's business. So think about what the question's asking. The question's asking, what would happen if she started to cut one of the product ranges, or 2 of the product ranges, or 3 of them on her business? You may want to pause the video now and actually have a think about how you answer this question. Now, this question here is a little bit tricky. There actually is no key term, really. It's easy to define. So you probably just want to get straight in and make a point and then explain it. And you need to look at the data in the table to justify some of your answers. Pause the video now and then unpause it and have a look at some of the answers. This is a tricky question. I've done it on purpose. So discuss the possible impact that cutting the product range will have on B's business. Well, what I've done is, because I knew this already, I said the key term was product range. And I just said product range is the products that the business sells. It would not be any expectation for you to do that. Notice my next point is that I say if B was to reduce the product range, then this could make the business more profitable overall. So that's my first point. That's my first argument. How have I got to that argument? The organic honey is actually being sold at a loss of 50p per jar. So I looked back at my table and thought, they're losing money here. They're selling these items at a loss. Meaning the business is actually making a loss at the gross profit stage of £5,000 on this product. Now I performed the calculation. That's application. And by doing that, that takes this answer to the next level. So notice I'm justifying my answer. That's moving it through that level, making it a detailed answer. All because I've got the time, because I'm thinking about this, trying to back it up. This is because the business is currently selling a product that is 200 units under its break-even point. Again, I spotted that. So it's below the margin of safety. There is no margin of safety at the moment in this case here. If the business was to scrap that product line, then this would increase profits in the long term. However, it does mean that it may upset some of its customers who used to buy this product, and it could damage the reputation of the business. Notice there, I'm just trying to justify the other side of the argument. I'm just trying to show what I know. That line probably wasn't actually needed, but I'm just trying to show the examiner that I could think about from the other side. Because obviously it makes sense to cut it when we look at it that way, but will it damage their reputation? And will it upset those few customers that did buys? And maybe will the competition now benefit if we pull out the market and don't sell our line? Let's go further into this answer. However, this is the most expensive product the business sells. So if they were to increase the marketing, they could increase the sales, and then in the longer term, possibly increase the price they make and increase profits. Notice again that I am making my own argument here. I'm justifying my argument, and that gets me marks. Because I'm backing up my point, I get the marks. If I just state it, so saying that they can increase the price to make more money, that's a low-level answer. Because I'm explaining why, in depth, that's hitting all the criteria. Then I go a bit further. All of the other products the business sells currently make a profit. However, the value honey has a really small margin of safety. So notice that this is where my point's going now. I'm showing now that I've worked out that the value honey's got a really small margin of safety, only 10 units. However, also makes the largest gross profit per item. So I spotted I make more money on every jar of value honey I sell. So cutting the profitable products could be foolish, as a business would start to making a loss. So I've linked it back to my question, because remember the question said, discuss the impact. So I'm telling you now, if you cut that, the value range, it could be foolish. And then, of course, I'm giving my conclusion, bringing it all together. The biggest threat to the business is a small margin of safety on its products that it provides the largest gross profit. This should be spending more money on advertising and increasing sales of all the products, especially the most profitable range. So I'm making a decision what I think, how they should be spending more money on developing their products and increasing their product range. And that would be a high-level answer. There are many answers you can give that question. It's all about how you use the data. Notice, though, the concept that's happening. I am justifying my answer. That's why I'm saying to you, never in the exam finish early. Take your time, go back over it, add more detail, try and get the examples in. These questions are positively marked, so they're looking for the positives, not for the negatives. Remember, in the discuss questions, typically there's no correct answer. It's just the way you develop and explain your answer and use data and calculation to support your answer. It really is as simple as that. You are getting marks for justifying an answer. Business has no right or wrong answer typically. It has many answers that are right, so long as you justify it. So remember to show your working, explain your points, try and use examples where possible, and you'll be perfectly fine at the exam. These are all skills you've learned all the way through life. Nothing new. Okay, that's it. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. It's at BeeBusinessBee. Like my Facebook page. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. And remember, more resources and tests can be found on my website at BeeBusinessBee.co.uk. And remember, don't just watch these videos. Actually make some notes or attempts on the questions, because that helps to develop your level of knowledge and understanding.